Hello everyone, my name is Kathy Mammon and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Strategies to Solve for Cross-Device Attribution, a Q&A with Paul Pellman from Adometry by Google. I'm here to give you a few notes about today's webinar. All attendee lines are muted. If you have any technical difficulties, please let me know by using the chat feature located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please make sure to send a host and I'll get someone to help you. This session will be recorded and all attendees will receive a copy of the materials after the presentation. Please ask us questions. We encourage participation and we want this webinar to be as engaging as possible. So if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to send them our way using the question feature on your control panel. If we see your question come across, we'll try to ask it right away to get you an answer. Last but not least, we have our wonderful social media guru, Becky, live tweeting during this presentation. So if you'd like to follow the webinar on Twitter, you can do so using hashtag ARMobile, or if you'd like to follow Magnetic on Twitter, you can reach us at MagneticIS. So that's enough from me. I'm going to let James take it from here to introduce you to today's discussion and our guest speaker, Paul Pellman.
Thank you very much. Welcome to our webinar. For those of you that are looking at the screen, here's a description of what we're going to cover. And one way to think about it, the way that I like to think about it, is I've been in digital media long enough to remember the time when we had shared devices. The big problem was you had a computer in the living room and a lot of people were using it. And we have the antithesis of that problem today. So whereas my 14-year-old daughter would have been using a shared computer, she happens now to have 3 devices, a phone, a tablet, and a laptop. And even within those devices, you have the difference between an app and a mobile web, and you have multiple browsers on them. And so with 3 devices, you could easily look like 6 people. But with the addition of location and other things, there are as many opportunities as there are threats. We're going to talk about them today. I got with me Paul Pellman. Paul, welcome.
Thanks, James. Great to be here.
Paul, we have 500 people on the line with us today.
That's awesome.
Which is
a big
awesome,
topic.
Which is a big topic. So, so very, very exciting. Obviously, something that people care a lot about. I'm going to start by telling a little story about why Magnetic cares about attribution, because it's not obvious. We don't do attribution. Paul comes to us from Adometry, a company he ran and then sold it to Google. You know, if you believe that Google is going to buy the best solution in the market, then they bought Adometry. And he's been, you know.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. It's been almost exactly a year, so it's really helped us accelerate the importance in the marketplace around better measurement through attribution, which has been really, really encouraging.
And the reason we care about it is sort of long-standing. So Paul and I met about 3.5 years ago at a conference, and we decided to started talking about attribution. And this thing had just happened to me. I had a client on the line, and they said they were going to cancel us on the plan. I said, well, why are you going to cancel us? And he said, because you're just not performing up to speed. Well, what's wrong? After a little digging, we found out that we, and Magnetic does this thing called search retargeting, bringing new clients to someone who's selling something. We were the only search retargeter, and everyone else was a site retargeting company. And they said, well, so we're bringing new clients, and everyone else is just recycling the existing clients. And you're measuring me by the same thing. What's your attribution? And they didn't have a really good answer. I ended up telling them that they should just cancel us immediately because they'd see the whole campaign tank. That isn't exactly what happened, but it caused me to care a lot about attribution. We talked about it in that conference. We ended up running an attribution revolution roadshow, and we've done this a bunch, and I'm really thrilled to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here as well.
Our first slide here, for those of you who are watching the slides, mobile is disruptive. Your mobile campaign is that cute little puppy dog, and your display campaign is the couch. That's what happens to it if you're not coordinated. It's a very big mess. And here are some stats on why mobile is so important. Just to sort of describe what these things are, the first column here that looks like labels on items that are for sale is the number of people that start shopping on a device. And I think surprisingly, you'll see that most people, when they're going to start looking for something, start on their mobile phone. 65% of them start on their mobile phone. Why is that? why do you think they start on a smartphone? We've got other studies that show that people literally use the device that they're closest to them. Even if they're in their apartment and their laptop is just slightly over an arm's length away, they're going to start on their mobile phone. But then 2/3 of the people that start on their mobile phone will then complete it on something else. So that's the second category here. 61% go onto a PC or a laptop and 4% continue on a tablet. And you can see that with each of these people. So mostly people don't start on a PC. Mostly they start on a smartphone. If they do start on a PC, they're sort of 75% likely to continue on that one device. But you can see how if you are putting your attribution on the last click, for example, then you're going to get an overwhelming concentration on laptops and desktops versus mobile phones.
That's right. You're going to miss the influence that's being driven by mobile.
Right. So that's the problem. And this next slide is another way of looking at that same problem. It's some Google stats. If Crossdevice had no influence, and this is looking at paid search, lift in paid search conversions when you consider Crossdevice, this graph would be at 0 all the way down if you didn't look at cross-device influences. And so you can clearly see here double-digit lift in smartphones if you consider cross-device. So it's the flip side of the same chart. But let's start now with, I've done enough talking for, it's your turn.
Awesome.
Let's start by talking about what's the difference between a mobile strategy and a cross-device or audience strategy.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it really starts with, people's perspective. So a lot of folks, and I think this is going back maybe a few years, as mobile first started cropping up as a media channel, you had a lot of agencies and advertisers saying, oh, we need to have a strategy on mobile. We need to have mobile as part of our campaigns, no different than search being part of our campaigns, and display and video, all of these separate walled garden media channels to drive activity. And the challenge with that, especially when you take into account people consuming media across different devices, are, the challenge with that is you end up kind of exacerbating the same problem. And you really need to break beyond that and think much more about a cross-device strategy, which is how can you serve media and reach consumers as they're consuming media and using their different devices, so you can provide a consistent media experience, marketing effect to clients as they're seeing media across different devices. So I really think it's a difference between kind of tactical media execution, which is a mobile strategy, versus a more strategic kind of measurement perspective on cross-device. And I think over time you're going to see people talking more about cross-device strategies as opposed to mobile strategies.
Yeah, we've seen that on content as well. Strategy data that shows that if someone's experiencing something on their mobile phone, they really expect that experience to be the same on their other devices.
If it's done well, it's incredibly powerful. Creating that consistent message across devices, taking advantage of how folks are using their devices differently, and having that consistent message that drives to a conversion, recognizing that people have already seen media on their mobile device when they're now coming to your website on their laptop, understanding that difference so you can create a better user experience. All of that are pieces to a really robust cross-device strategy.
So in other words, what people used to say was, everything should be mobile first, and now just everything should be cross-device first.
I think it's really just going beyond the cookie.
Right.
So before mobile, a cookie was the method of uniquely identifying visitors, and that has its pluses and minuses, but it worked fairly well in a laptop-centric world or a PC-centric world. But now you have device IDs to complement cookies for your mobile device and your tablet device. And in that world, you just have to think differently. You need to bring those different IDs, device IDs, together to really get a person ID or a unique ID that transcends the device that people are on. And that's really the difference. Once you have that, you can start actually building campaigns around that information.
So let's talk about where the data comes from. I know, I'm going to sort of tee this up for you, I know that before you were bought by Google, you were partners with a company called Tapad,
yep.
Crossdevice.
That's right.
And then I also know that when you were bought by Google, you fired them.
Right.
For better or worse.
Yeah, nothing wrong with Tapad. They're a great company. It's just right. But
that I did not. We're actually a partner with Tapad. We love Tapad for everyone listening.
Yeah.
but talk to us about why, what the differences are between those two different types of solutions, what we call those solutions, and how everyone should think about them.
Sure. I think first you have to understand there's the underpinning of what you need to do a cross-device strategy well. And so what you need is you need an incredibly critical piece of data, which is essentially the device graph that ties an individual's different devices and cookies from their computer all under one common ID, so that you can understand that this iOS ID or this Android ID, this cookie or series of cookies, if someone's deleting cookies off their laptop, are all actually the same person. And that device graph is then essentially used as a new unique identifier versus the old unique identifier of a cookie. So that's the information you need. You need that device graph. There are two ways to get that. And I think at Adometry, we were really early to the market to recognize 3 years ago, as mobile was just starting to kick up, that you needed to have this cross-device data. To do attribution well, you have to look at all the media a user sees at a common ID. So we've always used cookie until recently. And so we saw this problem coming, and we reached out to the very nascent companies that were starting to build these device graphs, companies like TapAd and a number of others. And so we looked to create a relationship with them to help solve this problem. So because of that, I think we understand kind of where these sources of data come from. And there's really two distinct ways that you can capture this data. The approach that third parties like TapAd take is they use what's called a probabilistic approach, which is they will discern patterns within Wi-Fi networks. So within a certain Wi-Fi network, they'll see that there are all these devices that tend to access the internet at certain times of the day. They access the same type of content. And through that information, they can discern or guess, essentially, that those different device IDs are actually, and cookies are actually the same person. That's a probabilistic approach. The other approach is what's called a deterministic approach, which is you actually have real logged-in data. So if I think about myself, I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal Interactive. I read the Wall Street Journal Interactive on every one of my devices. So the Wall Street Journal knows who I am across those devices because I've logged in. Similarly, both Facebook and Google have that same information. As I use Gmail across all my devices, or as I'm in a logged-in state doing searches using Android, all these different ways that Google gets that deterministic data. Same thing with Facebook. If I'm logging into Facebook or even Twitter or a number of other sites, you get that data. Now, deterministic data can be very accurate. The challenge is finding a partner that has enough scale where you can see enough of that to be able to use that as essentially your foundational device graph. And really that's where it limits the options. There's really only two companies that have that kind of scale. It's Google and Facebook. Facebook's come out and talked a lot about this.
You don't even think Twitter is not big enough?
Twitter's a great company. It's just they don't quite have the scale. They're big, but they don't quite have the global scale around users logging in. And look, there's challenges even with deterministic data. As Facebook starts to see more and more of their activity happening on mobile, they're actually having more and more of their users that don't actually log into Facebook on their tablet or on their PC. They're solely logging in through their mobile device. So again, in that scenario, you're not going to pick up those devices, and that leads to the there's kind of limitations to each approach.
Yeah, so talk about the strengths of deterministic and its weaknesses, and the strengths of probabilistic and its weaknesses.
Sure. So for deterministic, the strength is it's accurate because it's real logged-in users. Also, it tends to be a little bit privacy policy forward approach because you can make that part of your privacy policy, and people can know very clearly that you're using this data to do things like tie devices together to provide media. The negative, or where deterministic data can have errors, is it will miss devices. So the Facebook example I gave before, users not logging into Facebook across all their devices means that Facebook misses connections that are really there. Same thing at Google. If I'm only using Gmail on my tablet and my mobile phone, but I'm not leveraging it on my PC, if that were the case, then Google wouldn't have that data. So deterministic tends to miss connections, but the connections that it has are accurate. Probabilistic, the benefit of probabilistic is you have third parties like TapAd that can actually get scale using this deterministic or this probabilistic approach. So they can build a big enough device graph that can allow marketers to then use that in a scalable way. The other benefit of probabilistic is they make that data available to multiple partners like TabAd, or partners like Magnetic. So if I'm a marketer, I can actually use that data across a number of different media sellers to buy cross-device data. Whereas, leveraging both Google or Facebook data, I'm only going to be able to leverage that data, at least today, through their networks from a media buying perspective. So I can use Google's device graph to buy media within the Google network. I can use Facebook's device graph within Facebook to buy Facebook media, but I'm not going to be able to use Facebook's device graph to buy media on Magnetic. The negatives on probabilistic are they tend to overestimate connections. So they're looking at all this data to discern connections, and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to assume that devices are connected that really aren't. So probabilistic tends to overstate the connections, whereas deterministic tends to understate connections.
Great.
I had a question come in about probabilistic.
Yeah.
And the question is that method could work well in single homes, but then is it at all feasible in an office space or public space?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I look at where I work now, Google. So I'm here in New York with James. I've been in the New York office all week, 1,500 people, all under, and there's a whole guest access so that hundreds of visitors to Google every day are using the guest network. And if I'm using that Wi-Fi data, those all might look like the same user. So obviously, I think that, yes, you could have that, but the folks like TabAd have been doing this long enough where they can kind of discern those patterns. I mean, obviously, someone's not going to have 3,000 connected devices.
Yeah, and isn't it true that one of the ways they do that is they look at not only where you are and how you're connected, but also the content you're looking at. So, for example, I'm a squash fanatic. So I look at squash sites. I'm going to get that not a lot of people.
That's right.
Google, look at squash sites.
That's right. So that's another way. It's not just the timing of the connection. It's also the content that you're consuming. And then some of the companies leverage small amounts of deterministic data from partners they work with to essentially validate their probabilistic models. So the simple things of, I will admit, when we first started working with TabAd, we saw some of that, but that was many years ago, and I think they've really, like anything, they continue to improve their processes and their efforts and get more and more refined to just ensure the data is becoming more and more accurate.
We had another question, actually, which before we move on, I thought would be interesting to ask, which is current estimates of online fraud as high as 50%, with a model of 20 to 30% range and percentages as high as 60% for online ads. How does your model of attribution count for this?
Yeah, fraud's a huge problem in the digital ecosystem. I honestly don't think fraud, just to bring it back to mobile, I don't think fraud's really a challenge yet in mobile, for the very simple reason that mobile inventory isn't selling at CPMs as high as other digital media channels. Fraudsters go where the money is. Yeah. So fraudsters initially went after the cost per click space because the revenue on a click basis was so high. They're now actively going after the video space because video views are so highly valued, and doing some in display, but my perspective is very little in mobile. But here's how we handle it within Adometry. So first, when we collect data, we're collecting viewability data. So we can actually see if the ad is seen or engaged with. That's one quick marker that we can use many times to uncover or make sure we don't value fraudulent inventory. But the other thing that we do, and just to give insight in how our attribution model works, is we look at all the media elements that users see at a user level, and then if they convert or not. And our methodology essentially looks at how all the users that saw the exact same sequence, how they converted versus a similar group of users that saw almost exactly the same media sequence, but maybe that's missing just one ad. And we look at the relative difference in conversion rate of those two ads to discern the credit of that one ad in question. And so an ad that's fraudulent, that's not viewed, will never get any incremental credit because it won't lift conversion. Right. And so by default, our methodology ferrets that out from the analysis, and that's one big benefit we have. Again, just to bring it back, I think that's not really a problem in mobile yet. As mobile inventory starts getting more of its due, because I do think mobile is driving quite a bit more value than it gets credit for in a last event or last click world. I think as it gets its due, the prices will come up on that media, and then the fraudsters will start to jump in. And I think this is all about, you need to protect yourself as an advertiser with better, more accurate measurement vehicles and measurement platforms to ensure that you're really getting what you paid for.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's move to the next question here. So with the addition of mobile and location and some of the other things that a device can do when it's with you all the time, which was never true before, what other analytical capabilities have you seen out there in the market?
So the mobile device is really changing. It's incredible the changes that are happening right now in the digital ecosystem because of mobile. The first thing you have to realize is essentially everyone's carrying around these personal people meters. My mobile device is never more than typically 3 or 4 feet from me. It's typically on my person all times of the day, the waking day, and at night it's right next to me. It's my alarm clock when I wake up in the morning. And so that device and the fact that it's tied 100% to me as a person is really changing the way you start thinking about some of the data that's available. So we haven't started doing this yet, but we're seeing some of this data out there, which is essentially using mobile location data to really discern kind of where individuals are, and you can actually start to use that data as almost like a proxy for a conversion. So if you're a retailer and you're doing media activities, we're not that far off where you can actually track not just if that person converts online, but do they actually go to your store? Do you get them to go in the front door? And use the location device of the available through the mobile device to essentially track that as a conversion item. Same thing in the automotive space. Can you get someone to actually go to a car dealership? And so that ring fencing by geolocation, so you kind of track if someone comes into your facility or whatever, is really a unique opportunity. It's serving media now when people are in certain locations. All of that is kind of a new dimension that will start becoming available, and I think really exciting. Now there's privacy issues around all that, like there is in everything in the digital space, so we still have quite a few things to work out, but it's really exciting when you think about the potential there.
Are you going to put some of these sorts of features into Adometry, or do you think that's, because I know there are other vendors, I mean, we work with one, for example, PlaceIQ, that does this sort of thing. Do you think these things are going to come together, or do you think that people out there should continue to look for sort of an attribution vendor and a separate person for some of these location-based?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, at least what I've seen, is the current solutions that are out there are really kind of providing location-based insights in conjunction with media campaigns. So they're providing the two together, and when you buy media, that gives you rights from a data collection standpoint that you might not typically get from an analytics platform, and so we're looking at that. I think from our perspective is, yes, of course we'll look at that. I think we pride ourselves in Adometry, and I think part of the reason we were acquired by Google is we're at the forefront of all this stuff. Like I said, 3 years ago, we were looking at cross-device data and talking to folks like TapAd and other folks in the space to bring that insight into our platform. And so I look at this as the same thing. We want to be at the forefront of all of that. Again, doing it at the right time.
Very good. I'm going to move on to our next question here, which is biggest opportunity for cross-device attribution. So, what's the biggest thing you think?
Yeah, from my perspective, and we touched on this a little bit, which is, and it's almost not just what's the biggest opportunity, but what's the challenge with cross-device, which is if you're in a last-click, last-touch world where you're tracking all of your media activities based on a cookie, you're dramatically missing the influence of mobile as part of a cross-device strategy. And so really the opportunity is to leverage a better measurement platform so that you can really understand how users are converting. And we're starting to see this with clients where you see mobile activity in the insurance space. You see folks seeing mobile ads on their mobile, or media ads on their mobile device. Frankly, really good placements, because even though the size is limited, it's not like you got 15 other ad units you're fighting against. And we're seeing those folks convert on their laptop, because I don't want to fill out a cumbersome auto insurance quote form on my mobile device. I'm going to go to a more form-friendly vehicle. And so being able to track that and understand that influence, so you give fair credit to the mobile aspect. So now that means I'm going to drive more of my activity, the thing that's really driving people to convert. That's the opportunity, which is to leverage media across all these different devices to drive better results. We've seen the other thing conversely with some flash retail sites. They tend to sign up people for their service through traditional display advertising, but then folks actually convert pretty frequently on their phone. And so it's almost the opposite on certain retail sites where you're seeing media activity on laptops driving conversions on mobile devices. And so that's really the opportunity, which is getting that full holistic picture of how people are consuming media and where they're converting, and bringing all that together so that marketers make a really good, better decisions, drive better results.
you're going to be amused by this question. We obviously didn't tee up the question perfectly. So when we talked about deterministic and probabilistic data, we got a question here that says, what do you use now, deterministic or probabilistic in Adometry?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So again, we did have a very really great relationship with TAPAD before we were acquired, but we canceled that when we got acquired with Google, primarily because we're going to use our own data, which is exactly what we're doing. So we're using Google's deterministic. We're in the midst of we're actually beta testing this with clients now, where we're using Google's deterministic data within our platform. We think that gives us advantages. First, obviously, it's our own data, but obviously gives us advantages from, especially from Google's perspective on just comprehensiveness and accuracy, some of the things I talked about, and then also just a real above-board privacy policy around people knowing exactly, what they're opting into as far as how their different devices will be tracked.
So, following on that that question, so now with Adometry you can use deterministic data in the measurement, and if you're buying on Google, you can use deterministic data on the media buy. If you're not buying on Google, then you've got to use someone else.
That's right.
Again, sort of more stories about sort of funny things that happened with us inside Magnetic. We've had we had a client not so long ago who told us they wanted to target a cross-device campaign, which we did using TAPAD, great, wonderful, and then we found out they were not measuring the cross-device effect,
which is crazy.
And so we actually.
Let me guess, the campaign didn't work.
The campaign didn't work. So what do you suggest to people? Because literally what was happening is we were identifying people on either a mobile device and then or a laptop, and they were converting on the opposite one, and we were not getting credit for it.
This is crazy, and I think it's just really, as marketers, we can't be schizophrenic. We have to, we have to be more deliberate as we think about this. So I look at it, look, if you're going to employ these leading-edge media buying strategies, which make all the sense in the world, leveraging cross-device data so you can reach users consistently across their devices, you've got to have a measurement platform behind the scenes that's measuring the same way. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll never be able to justify investment. It goes back to your discussion, your early point around driving great value for probably a retailer, and they're getting all the credit to retargeters because they would just get last in the queue, jumping in right before someone converts. It's the same issue with cross-device. So, that's both a risk and opportunity. Otherwise, as a marketer, you're just going to have blind faith that your cross-device media buying strategy is driving results. But that'll only work as long as you don't have to cut your budget.
Let me test that with all the clients of Magnetic that are on the phone. Just trust me when I say my campaign's working.
Right. Exactly. You need to have a comprehensive measurement platform that's leveraging some of these best-of-breed solutions. It's really important. If you're not doing it, you're only getting more and more inaccurate as users start, consuming media and converting across more and more devices.
We've sort of touched on this question already. I don't know if there's any other points you want to make on this. How can we help mobile help us move beyond that last click, last touch model?
Well, I think if we don't move beyond last click, last touch, then mobile's going to suffer, at least as a media channel, because no one's going to be able to justify spending the money on it. I think we all realize as marketers that mobile is a great opportunity, and I think what happened in the last few years is folks tested a lot of things in mobile, and of course they didn't see good results because they haven't changed their mechanism of measuring results, and so they're canceling those campaigns or they're not investing more in those campaigns. So I think how mobile helps us is, I think, as you start looking at these cross-device strategies, and as the smart marketers realize they need to incorporate a cross-device measurement approach, measurement platform, whether it's us or any of the competitors that we work with that can at least do cross-device measurement as part of their attribution solution, that will start to bring mobile more into the mix, and I think that will start to generate better results. So I really think overall, when you have a better measurement system, it gives you confidence to step into mobile, to step into some of these newer channels, to really, because I'm going to have an accurate measurement platform that's going to tell me how that's really performing.
Look at that. We're right at half past. I've got a little summary I can do, but are there any other questions, Kathy, before we sign off?
Yeah, there were actually a ton of great questions that came in, so thank you everyone who sent in questions. And we know that we're at the end of our time, but if you guys don't mind sticking around to get your questions answered, we'll just continue on.
Right, so what I'll do is I'll make a little summary here for those of you that have to log off, and then we'll just keep talking here and answering the questions for as long as you want to ask us questions.
Great.
The summary I think we've got so far in this discussion is really important to target audience, not devices. So channel marketing is really a thing of the past. When people talk about omni-channel marketing now, they really mean reaching an audience in all the ways that they can, not the different devices. Mobile adds that other dimension of location. And using it, we have only just begun to scrape the surface of how that can be used. It's incredibly important to be consistent, and if you are going to do this cross-device targeting, for heaven's sake, include it in the attribution.
Right.
All right, so let's go. So thank you very much. That's halfway past, but let's continue with questions as an extra added bonus.
Great. Thank you very much, James, and thank you to Paul. So we had a question that came in, and it's, for auto, is Adometry partnering or planning to partner with a sales correlation partner, online to offline sales correlation?
It's a great question. So we work, and we've announced that we've worked for quite a while with LiveRamp. LiveRamp allows us to take any data that's available at an address level and map it to our unique identifier. So examples of that in the insurance space I always like to talk to. We have a number of auto insurance clients. Some of those auto insurance clients drive all their activity online, but a couple of our auto insurance clients drive most of their activity to agents. And so we're able to take those clients where all their activity is happening at the agent level and map all those policy bindings to our cookie, to our unique identifier, and show them how their digital media to user level is driving people to convert, even though those folks may never have gone to the insurance company's website. No differently than the insurance company that's driving everything digitally, everything from getting a quote for insurance to buying insurance all online. So that's one mechanism. Specifically within auto, if the automotive manufacturer has data on purchasers at an address level, we can obviously use LiveRamp to map that in. But we are starting to talk with folks and just getting ready to test. I don't know if there's something that I can announce, but I'll mention it anyway, where we're actually looking at how we can tie that data together with some of the standard kind of service bureaus out there that provide that data. So we can actually look at, for example, automotive company says, look, for Q1, we're able to look at attribution and how all their media drove people to configure a car, request a dealer, all those things online. And then at the end of Q2, we can look at that same data and say, well, how many of those folks actually bought a car, or what car did they buy? And so we're just starting to scratch the surface on that. Yeah, it's really cool.
Another question that came in, why does Google Analytics have its own attribution methodology?
Because they were around before.
Yeah, because they were competing with Adometry until Adometry got bought by Google. This is the short answer. We've actually spent a lot of time talking about this. Attribution is going to be part of every Google platform going forward. So there'll be aspects of attribution that are in AdWords. There'll be aspects of attribution that's in DoubleClick Campaign Manager, or what everyone still calls DFA, and within Google Analytics Premium. But the levels will be different to kind of fit those different customers. So someone that's driving all their marketing through AdWords is more than likely a small to mid-sized advertiser, and that's not really a good target for us at Adometry. And so we'll provide solutions there that fit within that. And as we'll kind of move more and more up market as we get to DoubleClick and then get to Google Analytics Premium and really look at selling Adometry to the most sophisticated kind of global 1,000 advertisers. So there is a method to the madness now, but the short answer is we competed. Google, if they didn't buy us, was going to drive their own in-house attribution solution through Google Analytics Premium.
Okay. Next question. If our customers don't sign in or create an account, nor do they sign up for emails since we are mostly one-off customers, how can we track cross-device?
You use a solution like Adometry. So the benefit that we have is we're leveraging the Google device graph for a client across all the media that they serve. And so we'll be able to tie that together, leveraging that data, and you'll be able to buy media through Google, leveraging that cross-device, or through Magnetic, leveraging Tap Ad. So you don't. As a matter of fact, I think that's the real benefit. There's a fallacy here, though, that if I'm a company that has people, and again, I always think of flash retail sites or certain retailers, that once someone buys from me and then they start to buy or interact with me across their different devices, that retailer has their own device graph. But you have to remember that's kind of, if I try to use that solely for my marketing activity, you're kind of putting the cart before the horse. You have to understand what someone's device graph is before they become a customer. And so that's when you need to use a comprehensive kind of data set like we make available through Adometry, so we can show you in all the media that you're buying how those different devices are tying together and driving conversion, And then, yes, when they come to your site and they convert, you're going to get that device graph, but you need to understand it earlier in the process.
And at a higher level, most sophisticated sellers of media now should have some sort of integration, as we do, with someone who can do cross-device.
That's right.
You do not have to have the cross-device data yourself.
That's right.
In order to buy cross-device data.
You need to have a measurement system to know that it's working for you, to track if it works after the fact. And if you find that cross-device campaigns and a cross-device strategy is working really well, it will change how you then strategize for your next campaigns, and you'll start to actively look for media sellers and partners that have a cross-device targeting capability so that you can start to do more of that activity. Yeah. So the foundation is you got to report it more effectively, and then when you do, you can then really reach out to those partners, great partners like like Magnetic, that have the capability to provide that cross-device capability within their media.
And just as you sort of teased a little information that maybe you'll be partnering with some automotive people, I'll sort of tease that stay tuned, is because I think one of the things that we're going to start being able to provide to people is, if you don't have that cross-device data there, we do have it, and we know what people are looking for. So we can actually provide you information on your customers, or we'll be able to.
Of course, it makes perfect sense.
So
yeah, that's great.
You look for those sorts of things coming to us.
I think if you don't have that cross-device data, that only reinforces how important it is to work with both media partners and have a measurement system that does incorporate cross-device data.
Just to level set for everyone on the phone, it looks like I have 2 more questions that came in that we haven't answered yet. So this next one is a long one. The question is, to move away from last click, last touch, we presumably need to move to multi-touch. Do you see this moving towards a pay per impression regardless of conversion, or do you see it as moving towards all parties splitting up the invoice for an acquisition?
So I'll try to answer. Let me answer it this way. It's a great question. The tactics on how you buy media can be varied in a number of different ways. The most important thing is to have better insight on what's really driving performance, and then you can figure out how you therefore want to buy media. Will it affect how a marketer wants to buy media when they have better multi-touch attribution insights across devices? Sure, it absolutely will. But that doesn't mean that I'm always going to buy media on a different aspect. We've seen clients that have used our insight to realize that, I'll give one example, automotive client actually saw that video was the strongest introducer and to drive people to convert. And so they then went to some of their video partners and said, I want to pay you on a first touch basis. I want to set a target on kind of a cost per first touch that I'm going to hold you to, so you, my partner, can optimize on that. And they used our insight to recognize that. So that's a different metric, and the marketer in their agency drove that based on the insight they saw, and they were able to work with the video partners to leverage that. I think that's where the insight comes in. There's a lot of different ways to buy media. I might not want to do a rev share with folks because I might not have to do a rev share. I might make a lot more money and get a lot better result by buying my media on a CPM basis because I know how well it converts. Conversely, I might have parts of my campaign that aren't performing that well on a CPM basis. So, but the vendor, the partner is basically telling me, look, we want to work with you. So I said, great, I'll work with you. I want to pay for your media across some kind of rev share approach. So I think ultimately it's up to the marketer, and when the marketer has better insights, they can make those kind of decisions.
Great. And the last question we're going to ask today is, once Adometry is chosen as the attribution partner, how long does it take to see the attribution reporting?
Yeah, so our onboarding is anywhere from 2 to 3 months to get someone up and running. It depends on, and the length of time depends on how much data we need to bring in, how fast we move with the partner. It's really a partnership with the client to get all the data right. Part of that is just collecting 30 days worth of data to have enough of a look-back period to do that. So times can vary from that, but obviously happy to talk to individual folks about what that might look like for their individual business.
Well, great. This has been a wonderful webinar. Thank you very much, James, and thank you, Paul, for joining us. And I just want to thank all of you on the line. I know we went a little bit over, but we really appreciate you sticking around. And if you're interested in learning more about this topic, we do have a great ebook that we just published last week on this topic. James and Paul actually were interviewed for this ebook with 6 other mobile experts. So you can go to our website, you can find it there. And thank you again. This concludes our webinar, and have a great day.